Charles, thank you very much for joining me at the EU Sustainable Energy Week.
Very nice to be with you today.
So tell me, how is the future shaping for E.DSO now that it's under a new Secretary General?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a revolution simply because they have a new Secretary General, but I would say that there are things that we want to continue, but things that we want to expand upon. So, I mean, one of the things we want to do is to expand our membership a bit. E.DSO is only electricity DSOs. We, at least up to now, have focused mostly on large and medium-sized electricity DSOs, and so our intent is not really to try to have as many DSOs as possible, but try to maximize the number of European customers who are in our membership, which is a little bit different tack. I also would say that you may know that the EU DSO entity will be incorporating gas DSOs, and the entity is a bit different animal because it's not an industry association the way we are. It's more of because it's a body that comes out of European law. So when that happens, we will be the only electricity-only sort of association here in Brussels when it comes to the distribution level. I would say that besides membership, we want to continue to focus on projects. I think that's one thing that distinguishes E.DSO from other associations, is that we really focus on horizon-type projects. For example, Twin EU is one that I was just talking about with someone here at EU Sustainable Energy Week. And so I think we will try to expand that a bit, become part of even more projects that allows our members as DSOs to gain more knowledge, have access to innovation. So I think that's really a focus, and one of the things I want to do is to make sure that the knowledge from those projects diffuses into our membership.
That makes total sense, and I think that is also in line with what the Commission wants to do by funding this project. So the networking, the bringing together various countries, communities, etc. But I want to cycle a little bit back to what you said about expanding a little bit your membership. Yes, it is true that E.DSO has the largest utilities, the largest DSOs as members, and also some medium size. Yes. Are you going to expand also to the small ones, like, for example, those regional ones in the Nordics, or not?
Well, we do have some members in the Nordics, I should say, but we are looking at some, let's say, still I would call them more medium-sized DSOs that we may perhaps want to have in the Nordics, but not probably the smallest. I mean, one of the things that we have talked about this internally, and I would say there's no answer on this yet, whether we should think about some smaller, would we allow, let's say, a DSO with less than 100,000 customers join? You may know, of course, that they have certain exemptions under EU law, and that means that the focus of your policy and committee might be a bit different. So it's more than just the membership there. You're also thinking about a little bit change of focus when you have a number of DSOs that, let's say, would be exempt from certain things that are focus for us now, like, let's say, network development plans, which they would be exempt from. So that is a bit different. Coming back to your original question, I would add that, for a long time, the focus of sort of electrification was on the generation side. And I think, Enlit members will know this, Enlit people interested in Enlit will know this, but I think now there's really an opportunity to have the next commission. So you're thinking about, and I know you want to talk about that a bit, but the next commission really focus on maybe smaller things that might seem less ambitious to the outside world. We're not going to have another Fit for 55 Green Deal probably in the next 5 years, but there are things that we can do, tweaks to really get grids to be able to not be a roadblock but an enabler, and I think that's really going to be the focus in the next 5 years. So
do you think that the next Commission and the next European Parliament is going to focus on smaller initiatives and not the bigger ones like Green Deal, like Fit for 55, like Repower EU?
I think that the next Commission will focus on trying to get those done, get those implemented.
So they're not going to kill them, they will continue?
I think they will continue, but I also would not expect that there would be even more ambition. So I know that maybe sounds like a nice, safe middle ground.
It is what it is.
But I think that's initial perspective. The council conclusions would seem indicate that, I think, the recent council conclusions. Yes, that's probably where we think things will go. We're still looking at it. Of course, no one knows for sure what the next commission will propose. I mean, but I do talk to people who are in the commission now, and it does seem like they want to do some things. That we won't have a completely inactive commission when it comes to energy and climate. But on the other hand, yes, promote having even more ambitious targets is probably not down the line in the next 5 years.
Which also makes sense because we need to be a little bit more competitive and we need to go along with the rest of the world. We can't do it on our own, right?
Yes, this is a concern. I mean, I know I'm talking beyond E.DSO and Europe, but it is a concern that Europe, as only a small portion of the world's population and emissions, if it goes alone and the rest of the world doesn't abate, the effect of Europe going alone is not going to be so large. And so there are other good reasons for doing this. One, you have to set an example. I mean, you can't just say, well, they won't do it, so we won't. Secondly, it is good for our energy security and our competitiveness in some ways in the longer term. In fact, Dieter Jürgensen, the Director General of DG Energy, was just saying that now in her keynote and talking about the link between competitiveness and sustainability, and there can be a link if you do things properly. So I'm certainly not arguing in any way that Europe should backtrack, but I am concerned that there are parts of the world that won't go along with it, and therefore that the temperature of global warming will continue. But the IEA has done better analyses than I can say just now, so I would prefer to those.
Absolutely. And this is where the EU projects that you mentioned initially are important. This is where the funding of the EU really becomes important. And this is why I think E.DSO wants to become more involved with the projects. Is that right?
Well, I think that projects can help us get to where we need to go in terms of finding new innovations. I mean, it's not just projects, but that they serve their role and exchange information. And so, yes, I think it's also important that projects don't sort of end and, wow, we had nice conclusions from them, and then let's move on to the next project. So I think we need to do as E.DSO, but the EU needs to do that more broadly in thinking about how to make sure those projects feed into reality.
Exactly, because this is precisely what is happening right now. We have very good projects, and best case scenario, they might get an extension. But afterwards, it's not a given that they will find a life, let's say, in the private or the public sector.
Yes, this is a concern. And we've also been an advisory board of some projects, and we saw one project where the population had participated in the project, and then it was a project even for citizens to experiment even with their own energy consumption. And I remember one of the things that the people were shocked at, this is ordinary people, not people who work in the energy sector, was that sometimes it was good for them to increase their energy consumption. And that's maybe something counterintuitive that the average person might not think about, but that could be good for the energy sector. But okay, the project ended, and then the people will just, what now? So this is an issue for, I think, everyone participating in the projects and for policymakers to think about making sure that those projects translate into something usable.
Speaking of policymakers, if you had the opportunity right now to speak to them and force them, let's say, to do one thing, if you had a magic wand, what would that be?
Well, for European policymakers, I would say for them to think about DSO funding as much as TSO funding. I know TSOs, of course, are trans-border, and so it's a natural instinct of the EU to think about TSOs because they are cross-border, and DSOs are not, with some rare exceptions. But I think that kind of funding gap is something that needs to be addressed. Yes, their grid tariffs can be increased. Yes, you can think about the fact that grid tariffs could be increased while energy costs decrease if you're unlocking low marginal cost renewables. But you probably, for political reasons as much as economic ones, you probably do need some EU funding. And so the EU funding mechanisms, the way they work now, are not really designed for DSOs. And so I think that that's something we even heard today from the MEP, Morten Peterson, talking about a kind of funding mechanism for grids. And so that's something I think that's one of our objectives and something we're working on.
And it is a nice topic that perhaps we can delve in a bit deeper at a later interview.
Okay.
Charles, thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure to talk to you and with Enlit today.
And thank you all for joining us. If you liked what you saw, then don't forget to become a member of the Enlit community.